We found ourselves in Louisiana. We had been searching many years. Now our lives are intermingled. It's like music to our ears.
Like the variety of its homes, Louisiana's legends also come in all shapes and sizes, from the expected to the unexpected. And no one knows quite what to expect, any more than they knew back in 1803 when Napoleon sold it for $15 million, that this colorful state would become one of the best buys in history. Plenty of ancient people knew about Louisiana, however, 3,000 years ago, when they built its first city just north of the present towns of Monroe and West Monroe. And high above the Ouachita River, we're on our way to see that ancient city, what's left of it. They call it the largest civilized prehistoric gathering place yet found in the United States. Our little plane takes us past rice fields to the strange mounds and ridges, first revealed in aerial photographs in the 1950s. Later excavations show this was the home of over 5,000 people at the time of Moses. It's called Poverty Point, after the farm on which it was found.
Well, we're strictly state funded.
The guide says these people were bird worshippers, and that the mound we're climbing is a giant bird effigy, one of dozens they built.
One in the south, one in the southwest, now one in the west sector, one in the northwest.
At the top, looking back on its 70-foot tail and 320-foot wingspans, gives an idea of the size. The mound's exact shape, however, was discovered in a carving made at the time Ramses II sat on the throne of Egypt. Other artifacts tell of hunting, fishing, and cooking with clay balls. Treasures to scientists trying to learn more about these earliest settlers, the Poverty Point people. But other treasures harken back 100 years to when cotton was king of the South. No longer true of this fluffy little ball, cotton is no longer king. Louisiana's cotton gins have been reduced from hundreds to just dozens, but every fall loads of raw cotton still come in to be cleaned and processed. Giant vacuums suck it up into over 3 miles of heating, washing, and drying before the cotton gin machine cuts out all the seeds. Each of the 15,000 bales of clean cotton produced by this gin weighs almost 500 pounds, and it's still some of the finest cotton in the world. Cotton was king, the waterways must be palaces to outdoor pleasure seekers, and some of it has forests growing right out of it. At Lake Chinnery, even experienced boatmen need maps to find their way through. Lake Chinnery is part of a state park with hundreds of acres of moss-covered cypress, tupelo, pine, oak, in groves so thick the sun seldom hits the water. In fact, it's so confusing, signs are needed to keep from getting lost, or worse. But this sign means Southern hospitality. It's part of a 170-year-old plantation cottage in Bosco, where we've been invited to join the ladies at a bridesmaid's luncheon. In some ways, women's luncheons are the same everywhere. There's always posing for the pictures, and there's always some pictures that really have a tough time ever getting taken. But here, sitting under a giant pecan tree, At tables set in fine linen and china, we start to appreciate what's meant by gracious Southern living and Southern cooking. With chilled peach soup and Wachita shrimp salad, topped off with mint julep pie. I think she likes it. But it's these luncheon guests we like. Cats with legs half the normal length, and no one knows why they were born that way. Are they dachshund cats? He's not sure. But whatever, the anomaly never before recorded doesn't stop them from holding their own. In Monroe and West Monroe, we find other legends of how a single little crop dusting plane grew into a major airlines. And of the World War II flying tigers. It's here its famous general, Claire Chennault, lived. Antique shopping in West Monroe, we're also told it was here the first man to ever bottle Coca-Cola lived out his life. Monroe's homes, though, reflect many of the Scots and Irish and English who migrated south to make their fortunes. Men like Henry Bligh, the first parish judge, who imported mulberry trees. He was hoping to start a silk industry. It failed, but success came later in cotton. Leighton Castle now stands on the original plantation. And Joseph Wiedenhorn's home is now a Bible museum. The formal gardens in back were created by his daughter, Emmy Lou. Emmy Lou was an operatic singer, but right before World War II, while on tour in Germany, her father persuaded her to give up her career and come home. She did, and devoted the rest of her life to these gardens and her collection of Bibles. Emmy Lou died in 1954, but Christine, her private secretary, carries on, watching over the gardens, making sure everything stays as Emmy Lou wanted. A perfect setting for her Bible collection and a gift to the people of Monroe. And inside, Emmy Lou still watches, too, over what's called the most unique private Bible collection in the world. Her talent may have come from her father, Joseph. He was the first to bottle Coke in his candy store for a friend's picnic in 1894. But her love of Bibles came from her Danish grandmother. She collected over 1,500. Original Martin Luther's, Tyndale's, Danish, even John Brown family Bibles are here to enjoy, free of charge.
Take this bread, eat, for it is my body which is given for you.
Bible devotion comes to life just outside Monroe, the Ruston Passion Play, where members of a church recreate the final days of Christ.
Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit.
All volunteers, all out of love for the Word. 200 miles west is Shreveport, the town that indirectly got its name from logs, too many of them. The Great Raft, it was called in the early 80s, jamming the Red River over 160 miles. Today, the Red flows unhindered, due mainly to a New Jersey man, Captain Henry Miller Shreve, an engineer who volunteered to clear a path. It took 5 years, but the town was so grateful, it took his name. He now overlooks the river he freed. And today, Shreveport's the metropolitan center for northwest Louisiana, but its colorful past still peeks through if you know where to look, like a downtown drugstore, where you can get some very unusual toiletries. Voodoo items all line the walls, and they do a good business selling them. The druggist tried discontinuing them, but so many people complained, he had to restock. And there's something for everything. Can you believe even a little romance in an aerosol can? The Municipal Auditorium here once hosted the Louisiana Hayride, a popular 50s show with musicians like Hank Williams. And its blues heritage still lives through this man, Jesse Babyface Thomas. He's a world-renowned blues artist, and he continues to perform at 70. Strumming the special blues sounds unique to Shreveport, and carrying on the northern Louisiana blues traditions, others began. Like Hughie Ledbetter.
I'm going all around the world trying to find a sweet Mary.
75 years ago, he composed songs we still sing, like Good Night, Irene. Now Leadbelly's grave is visited by musicians from around the world. And along with the music are roses. Just outside Shreveport, over 20,000 rose bushes bloom at the American Rose Center in 40 individual gardens, perfuming the air from April to December. It's a rose lover's delight, this 120 acres right in a piney woods forest. It's the largest garden in the world devoted to America's national flower. And we're off for another national pastime at the Louisiana Downs in Bossier City, just across the river from Shreveport. Where horse racing's been popular in Louisiana since the 1880s, when a missionary wrote he was shocked to find race paths right in front of a church at one of the settlements. Today, some of the finest horseflesh in the country come to Louisiana Downs. And on a busy day, over 17,000 can watch as they approach the gate and decide their choice. Horse racing's still exciting to thousands of Louisianians, except them perhaps having to level the track each time. But we're off, too, 20 miles south to Lake Bistineau, through an enchanted forest filled not only with trees, but remarkable sculptures made of leftovers from a bygone age. Ancient farm implements turned into birds. And the commonplace given a place of uncommon honor deep in the woods. The creator is an artist who's as unique as her art. A native Louisianian, her name is Clyde Connell. This little slip of a woman is internationally known with worldwide exhibits. But here she lives, working every day. And each new project reflects the passion she still carries, not only for her native state, but for all native cultures. She uses only natural or found materials, and her 50 years of extraordinary work has cut through all the labels, from abstract to folk and primitive, to art recognized, uniquely her own. She was born of old Southern gentry on a plantation, but she's chosen quite a different road to follow than expected. That of civil rights activist and painter and sculptor. Most of all, lover of mankind. And at 90, she still looks forward with enthusiasm to her next project. Clyde Connell is herself an original, a legend in Louisiana. And 100 miles south, we come to the town of Natchitoches. It was brought to life by the play and movie Steel Magnolias, but it really began when two Indian brothers divided the territory down here. One tribe created Nacogdoches, Texas, the other Natchitoches, Louisiana. The Spanish built an outpost 6 years before New Orleans, making Natchitoches the oldest European town in the Louisiana Purchase. But its French history is strongest, beginning with the explorers and continuing with their children, first-generation Americans called Creole. And Gentle Magnolias belie the turbulent times when Natchitoches passed between Spanish and French. When Monsieur Louis de Saint-Denis marched up the Red River to trade and to push French claims against the Spanish frontier. Saint-Denis was imprisoned, and it was only through the love of a Spanish commandante's granddaughter that he was saved. Others, not so lucky, lie beneath the old French crosses in the graveyard. But Saint Denis is still remembered, as are the years following. In 1776, this home of cypress, mud, and Spanish moss was brand new. Now completely restored, it's lighted only by candles. And other interiors show a more elegant French history with original mementos and portraits. In fact, there's so much history, the sign is very hard to believe. A good way to see Natchitoches is by boat along the beautiful Cane River. And many say it's the only way to see it. And if you don't own one, it's okay. Chuck runs the local boat tours. He, along with everyone else in town, has lots of stories about Natchitoches, and he tells them every evening to the boatloads of visitors who take the trip downriver. He tells them about the Roke House, built by a former slave who earned his freedom late in life, and of the revolt of the Natchez Indians in Mississippi that spread here until Saint Denis fought him off and won. Many of Chuck's stories are filled with a bit of humor, and his sign tells us he's even willing to help us out if we're touched with a little romance while we're on board. Natchitoches really comes to life at Christmas, though, when the town and the banks along the Cane are lighted for about a mile, and huge displays go down the river. Then thousands come to enjoy. I mean, thousands. Front Street is jammed with tourists, taking it all in, touring the houses. Yes, the Festival of Lights is a legend it seems half the state shows up for. But south, the river road winds through areas filled with stories of slaves and owners. In fact, they say this was the setting for the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. No one's sure, but this graveyard carries the name Simon Legree. And Melrose Plantation was home to an art patron who invited artists and writers to stay free of charge in the 30s. Once cooling off in the heat was Erskine Caldwell. And the old cabins behind Melrose have their tales. This may be the oldest African architecture on the North American continent, dating to colonial times. And one goes back to a slave in the mid-1700s who bore her French master 10 children. Eventually, she gained her freedom and created a dynasty. And Clementine Hunter, the Melrose cook, became the state's most celebrated artist, the Black Grandma Moses. She died in 1987 at 102. Oakland's one of the few plantations along the road that stayed in the same family. The 8th generation of Prudhomme still live at Oakland. And we've been told Mrs. Alphonse Prudhomme has a unique museum, no longer open to the public, but she's invited us to see it. And at 90, she's still full of humor and friendliness, even to Yankees.
Yeah, in the home and under the home. All right.
And she takes us under the plantation house itself to her special place, where over 170 years of her family's history has been lovingly encased. And we soon learn it's not any dry museum, as she tells us stories about the antique photographic equipment and paper goods, and how a slave made the hand-forged iron crosses, and how another, who could neither read or write, made these well-digging drills from pictures he was shown, finished to a fraction of an inch. And everywhere reminders of what life was like, the joy of the first electricity. She even invites us to try a homemade shock machine used to treat nervous disorders. Lulu's proud of her museum, and perhaps for us, the last visitors to ever view it, it does signify a world gone forever, as does the 100-year-old garden with its 19th century Irish bottles still lining the path. And the kettle for making sugar on the lawn, and all the rest. It seems a separate world, for her, slowly evolving, but with roots deep in the past. But it's a world we'll never see the likes of again. Bye, Lulu. South we come to central Louisiana and the cities of Alexandria, Pineville, and Marksville. And just north of these cities, the Kashashi National Forest with thousands of acres of pine and oak. And it really comes as a surprise to visitors who expect the state to be all deltas and bayous. Another surprise is Alexandria's historic Hotel Bentley, a fine old hotel that hosted Dwight Eisenhower, Omar Bradley, Mark Clark, George Patton, and other Army commanders in 1940 as they planned strategies for the D-Day invasion of Europe. Here they carried out the largest peacetime training maneuvers in U.S. history. And nearby, in what's left of Fort Bulow in this trench, 100 years before, Confederate soldiers defended Alexandria against Union boats coming up the Red River. They were unsuccessful. The city was burned to the ground. But that fight still goes on every year in a field where the date is May 5th, 1864. Again, it's Confederate against Union brother. Now the cannon powder is mixed with flour to give a better show, but the battle's intensity is still the same. Alexandria's people have never forgotten the burning of their city by the Union. Fighting's fierce. The results never change. Only this time, the flag still waves in the Confederate camp, symbolizing the struggle of that time, along with the people acting out what happened then, some of it with a bit of humor, especially by this fellow. He goes through this every year. But it's a memory still alive by a people dignified in their beliefs. And proud of the heritage they've earned in defending them. And part of that heritage are haunted plantations, like Lloyd's Hall, built by William Lloyd, one of the original Lloyds of London. But on some nights, they say a ghostly violin player appears on the balcony. Could it be William himself? He was tarred, feathered, and hung here. Or perhaps the suitor who deserted William's sister, causing her to jump to her death from this window. No one knows. In fact, the house has always been marked by misfortune because William had been disowned by his family in England, given his inheritance, and told never to return when he built it. And tourists sit unconcerned by the ghost stories, but during our stay, shoes disappeared and switches were mysteriously turned on in locked cars. Was that the Union soldiers' doing? He was caught and killed in the attic during the Civil War, his bloodstains still on the floor. Or perhaps it was just the beginning of another legend. And nearby in Marksville at the Tunica-Biloxi reservations, we find other legends, as once a year tribes from around the country come to compete in dancing and singing at the Blue Corn Festival. These Native Americans hold sacred ceremonies and tell the stories of some of the over 20 separate tribes that have played an important part in the state's history. And the 12,000 that remain are very proud of that heritage, passing it on to their children through the eagle feathers given out for their participation. The road east from Marksville leads to Louisiana's capital, Baton Rouge. And it's here we get our first view of the Mississippi, the mighty river that gives this capital city one of the largest and busiest deep-sea harbors in the nation. The new Capitol building was built in the 30s by Governor Huey P. Long, who ran the state like his own personal dynasty. Engineers said it couldn't be built on swampland. Huey said, find a way, and they did. Now his statue faces it, but it also marks his grave. before in 1935, then U.S. Senator Long, while walking with his bodyguards, was assassinated. Was it by the man immediately gunned down in the hall? The mystery remains, along with what they say are the legendary bullet holes. The old Capitol, once called the Monstrosity on the Mississippi by Mark Twain, is now the site of the Louisiana Blues Festival each year. Baton Rouge has its own style of blues, and some just can't contain themselves when they hear it. Blues music may be international, but Louisianians take it very seriously. And not just at festivals, but in establishments like Tabby's Blues Box. Tabby Thomas is Baton Rouge's most zealous but unpaid blues promoter, and musicians from all over come to sit in with him, not for the money, just for the honor. And he welcomes all blues lovers alike. At Tabby's, culture mingles with culture through music. It's a unique experience, Louisiana blues, and Tabby its most ardent supporter. But outside, the Mississippi flows by some of the finest antebellum homes in the South. Homer's house, used in the movie Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Destrian Plantation, the oldest left intact in the lower Mississippi Valley. San Francisco, an incredibly galleried Creole-style plantation, and Oak Alley, all are filled with authentic furnishings, offering a view again of a time past forever. The plantation we're visiting is the largest ever built, and one of the last, Nottoway. The 64-room mansion was built by John Randolph, a sugar planter. And in 1859, John moved his wife Emily and 11 children in, and here they lived for 30 years. In fact, 6 of the 8 Randolph daughters were married in this grand ballroom. John managed to keep Nottoway through the Civil War by signing a loyalty oath to the Union. But after he died, Emily auctioned it off for $100,000. And the last image of her was meticulously gliding room to room in a long black dress, shutting each of the 200 windows and closing the grand chapter of this plantation's history. But a few miles south, a strange bit of history does repeat itself every Christmas holiday as wooden structures start to appear along the levee of the Mississippi. Exactly why they're built and when this all began, no one's sure. But the people in Gramercy construct them every year, not just in teepees, but all kinds of fantastic shapes. And it takes weeks of hard work to build. Most are father and son affairs, but at Christmas Eve, they torch every one, and they're all burned to the ground. Now, some say this all started in the 1880s by the French priests who moved to the town close by. Others insist it was a merchant who burned boxes to attract the boats coming up the Mississippi. But whether it's to mark the way to midnight mass or help Papa Noel, the Cajun Santa Claus, as he brings goodies, no one really cares. It's just a family Christmas celebration. A strange bonfire lighting on the levee. Folks come from miles around to see the river all lighted. And it must make a wonderful sight to the boats still passing by. But a short hour away is the Crescent City, Louisiana's largest, New Orleans. Home of the Superdome, this bustling metropolitan complex. But it's also home to the Mississippi and Delta Queens, taking their passengers in paddle-wheeled luxury up the river. And home to 10,000 fish and other sea creatures who live at the new Aquarium of the Americas. Just completed in 1990, the aquarium is operated by the Audubon Institute, and here entire ecosystems have been recreated, from Caribbean reefs to the Amazon, Mississippi, and the Gulf of Mexico. It provides authentic environments for its inhabitants and a great chance for visitors to peer at them. The aquarium's slogan is really to see life close up, and looking through almost 1.5 million gallons of seawater, we sure can. But seeing life close up also means riding through neighborhoods. In the Garden District, where the grand houses of early sugar barons each try and outdo each other in opulence, grandeur, size. Others built camelback because taxes were levied only on stories facing the street. Still others have unexpected detail. Look closely. The fence's decorations are flowers. Yet seen in another angle, they become skulls. And the wrought and cast iron almost comes alive in the French Quarter, where each old Creole balcony has its own personality. They're all leftovers from the days when the city was Spanish and French. And the Quarter's St. Louis Cathedral and Jackson Square's legends draws visitors from around the world. Here they can walk the streets, enjoying the dozens of artists that work the walkways. And those artists give all kinds of shows. It's a good morning every morning in Jackson Square. It's all for tourists and all for fun. Along with the jazz. Louis Armstrong's magical trumpet playing is still remembered in a park. And the beat goes on in the street with Heck Bartholomew, musician, composer, and born-again Christian. And the budding stars of tomorrow on a street corner playing for donations. Jazz was born in New Orleans, and this young group carries on the tradition. They absolutely captivate the audience, especially this music lover. I bet it's the first time he's ever directed a band. He's just lost in a world of his own. In fact, he finally pulls the house down. But we're off taking a horse-drawn carriage through the French district. It's a great way to see the sights. From this vantage point, in fact, we notice things we may have missed just walking, like Jean Lafitte's old blacksmith shop. They say the French pirate used it to hold secret meetings with Americans, plotting to stop the British in the Battle of New Orleans. Now they say it's the world's oldest bar. An Ursuline convent, where the nuns used to educate the young ladies fresh off the boat from France. The original streetcar named Desire, brought to life by Tennessee Williams in his play. And the French market, the oldest in the United States, with thousands of bargains to browse through. And all this browsing can make us hungry, so how about breakfast at Brennan's? This 4-star restaurant serves 1,000 a day. And we stop into the kitchen, seeing how they use some of the 78,000 tomatoes and 31,000 mushrooms and over 1 million eggs each year. And it's been going on since 1946, when an Irishman named Owen Brennan, who wasn't even a cook, opened the first Brennan's on Bourbon Street. And waiting in the courtyard, this hungry guest gets turtle soup for starters. Imagine turtle soup for breakfast. But that's just the beginning. Wonderful eggs with artichoke, cream spinach, and Canadian bacon, all smothered in incredible hollandaise sauce. And if this isn't enough, down the street we can get a muffalata, a meat and cheese Italian sandwich that's huge. Or we can top it all off with French donuts, beignets. Now these take skill just to keep from drowning under all the powdered sugar. And some master them pretty well. But others, not so sure. A quick stroll down Bourbon Street at night, though, will walk off all those calories. And if we want to stay, Bourbon's jumping all night long with souvenir shops, jazz places, and some rather risque entertainment. But it's actually tamed down a lot from its first pirating days when walking the streets was definitely not a good idea, even in the midst of a crowd. But come morning, we're off for quieter places, the cemeteries. Because of its high water level, New Orleans above-ground tombs are all pretty well known, but Metairie Cemetery has some of the most elaborate, many costing over $500,000. And amid the marble and granite and artistry are wonderful stories. One of the most poignant is of a dog whose master passed away. Never leaving the dog too soon died. Now each week a new beau mysteriously appears on his statue. The oldest cemetery has walls lined in vaults, and they call them ovens because in the high heat remains are literally cremated, and after 1 year and a day, the same one can be used again. Dozens of people buried in the same spot. Among the early tombs, though, displays of pictures and other paraphernalia is said to signify the working of voodoo. And at the tomb of New Orleans' first voodoo queen, people still make their X's and turns to get their wish from Marie Laveau. Voodoo first came to New Orleans with the slaves, and Marie Laveau was its most famous practitioner. In the French Quarter, there's more voodoo and stories of the queen, how she twisted information given to her as a hairdresser to wealthy ladies to perform magic over their lives, and how her influence captured much of the early community. By using chicken's feet, dolls, and gris-gris bags to grant wishes. It's said Marie died peacefully in 1881, but there are some that say her spirit passed to others, still practicing in this city. But mostly tourists come here, fascinated by the items and the exhibit in back, where voodoo altars from Africa, Brazil, Haiti, Mexico, and the United States display for information, not worship, the strange attraction this belief has had for thousands all over the world. Bizarre, yes. Believable, well, as they say, there are those who believe in voodoo, others don't. But candle offerings still made to its voodoo queen make us wonder. But New Orleans has other wonders, the wonderful worlds of masking and Mardi Gras. In fact, the old French custom of masking is a tradition that's still popular with today's young girls. And mask makers all over the French Quarter make some of the finest, not just at Mardi Gras, all year long. These masks are entirely made by hand, and there's every color and style to choose from. And it's really never too early to get yours for the next parade. But the most elaborate Mardi Gras masks and costumes are sometimes displayed in museums, showing kings and queens and entire courts created by the crews or groups who participate. But among them, a particular type of costume few people know about, the costumes of the Black Mardi Gras Indians. The costumes of these Black Mardi Gras Indians are among the best, with incredible beadwork and feathers, and the legends behind them inspire us to seek out someone who knows more, a past chief of the first Indian tribe, Ed Montana. We find him at home, and he takes us in, shows us design for a new three-dimensional creation, and tells us it was his great uncles who were among the first to mask and parade over 80 years ago, and that the Black Indian tradition came from his great-great-grandmother, herself a full-blooded Indian. From that first tribe has evolved many in wards all over the city, each independent but adopting the heritage of the first, each adopting new themes, making new costumes that are only worn 3 or 4 times. And new creations are incredible, especially when seen all together, like here on a city street in February, where we've been privileged to capture the Ninth Ward Hunters as they give a rare performance. Their show displays not only their unique black Indian heritage, but the endless hours of each member's own handiwork in a vibrant array of color. And for us, their impressive performance is a fitting way to end our visit to New Orleans. We'll be returning for Mardi Gras, but now we'll go over Lake Pontchartrain to Cajun country. This is the forest primeval that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow spoke of in his poem, Evangeline. The tragedy of the Catholic French farmers driven from their lands in Canada by the British. Men and women separated, lovers parted forever. But after enduring incredible hardships, some found their way into a new French territory and made it their home, living in the prairies and along the bayous, mastering the waters in boats they called pirogues, making them for fishing, trapping, and hunting the wild game that gave them food. And from the original treckle came more, creating communities in the belief that family is everything, and everyone in the community is considered family. The forest and soil provided homes. Even moss stripped of its outer layer became stuffing for mattresses, furniture, and dolls. They survived by making everything they needed and using everything they made, finding joy in their music, sung in French and a little newly acquired English called Acadian after their homeland. And they stayed separate, leery of strangers who could do them harm, but offering hospitality to those they had befriended. And they kept their love of family, fun, and food. Most of all, they kept their faith for over 200 years. And they're still in the 14 parishes of southwestern Louisiana and the city of Lafayette, called the Cajun capital, and with good reason. Throughout summer, the sounds of fiddles, accordions, and guitars draw thousands to good times, like the Festival Acadienne. The Cajuns have an expression, laissez le bon temps rouler. It means let the good times roll, and they do, believing in hard work and hard play. And they love to come to the festivals where their history and craftsmanship are displayed, using the skills taught by their grandfathers, sampling foods they've been enjoying for generations, whether it comes in quarts or kettles. In fact, cooking cracklins or pork rinds in this heat is not easy, but the stirring goes on and the results are delicious. Among the dishes are some Yankees aren't quite used to, but sampling can bring some unexpected thrills, and it's all eaten with gusto, from the sausage to the cracklins, and they learn very young to do it very well. At the Cajun Dome once a year, we find out how serious they are about their cooking as chefs come to compete in the Culinary Classic, a sort of Olympics of cooking, Louisiana style. And there's classes showing how to break bread, among other things. And then it's down to work, all day long for the competing chefs. And they work all day long, starting from scratch and finishing up, slicing 1,000th of an inch off and arranging just so. Even tweezers help in the final result. And then at 4 o'clock, it's all taken in and displayed for judging. Culinary celebrities from across the country come to test and taste and pass sentence. Some of the judges, such as Paul Prudhomme, take their jobs very seriously. Others, well, not quite so much. But at night, the whole community is invited in to eat it all. It's more than worth the $50 ticket, and it's always a sellout. The highlights are the awards given to the best chef, and both the winners and diners go home very happy.
On the bayou in South Louisiana, where Clovis crawfish.
Nearby, in Lafayette, lives a remarkable historian, serious author, and storyteller, Mary Alice Fontenot, who's taught thousands of young Cajuns about their language through her books about a creature named Clovis crawfish, each written in English, but with many Cajun French words and expressions. She's been writing over 45 years. But like every Cajun, she's been cooking for a lifetime. And like all Cajuns, Mary Alice keeps close family ties. And each week she finds time to make the most delicious dishes, inviting relatives and friends in. Sometimes 15 to 20 show up to enjoy red beans and rice or griots and grits or some other Cajun delight. And it's all sprinkled with great and interesting conversation. Cajuns have a real respect for learning. Their universities reflect that, but their cemeteries show an even deeper respect for their faith and each other. In some are wooden grave houses with doors and windows and flower boxes and wonderful stories, like the young bride who died in 1899 without ever getting her dream house. So her husband built a 2-story replica right over her grave. It no longer stands. Or the feuding couple who kept separate quarters in their home, buried side by side. Theirs had a partition running right through it. It's gone forever, too. Another cemetery has the grave of a 12-year-old girl thousands say should become a saint. When Charlene Richard died of leukemia in 1959, it wasn't her death, but the way she accepted it that was unusual, offering it up for the salvation of all souls that made her so unique. And her piety has caused even priests to hope that soon she will be canonized. Prayers and flowers are left by those who believe she's performed many miracles after death, and thousands visit her grave regularly. The belief in miracles lies among the black iron crosses at the Academy of the Sacred Heart in Grand Couteau also. The Academy's been a girls' school for over 170 years. And it was here in 1866 that Mary Wilson, a dying young convert, was brought. Unable to eat or drink for over 30 days, she prayed to Blessed John Birchmans, a 17th century priest. Church and doctor's documents concluded Birchmans did appear to her and she was instantly cured. And after 22 years of investigation, the miracle of Grand Couteau was accepted as authentic. Today is graduation day at the Academy, and the girls from around the world walk in unison to ceremonies held under the oak trees. And each proudly receives her diploma, signifying the success she's achieved in one of the most rigorous curriculums in the nation. But our quest takes us on to nearby Karen Crow, where a woman has come to be healed by a treater. This Cajun practice of curing dozens of physical ailments dates back to their earliest history. Madame Comier has been a treater for almost 50 years. She says she's very ordinary. The healing comes from God, not her through her prayers. But her gift, passed only from man to woman and back to man, is a respected practice. And touching isn't even necessary. She can even treat by phone, and neither charges or solicits. People must ask for her service. Treaters are a source of comfort to many Catholic Cajuns, and it's amazing how often it works. But in the flooded rice fields around Lafayette from late spring to early summer, a totally different kind of ritual goes on. Farmers knee-deep in water mean it's crawfish time in Louisiana. Flooding the rice fields to catch crawfish in spring is just one way they've adapted the resources of their land. And each of the dozens of traps revealed scores of these tasty little shellfish. And they're going to be eaten as soon as possible. You know, it's said Acadians eat anything that doesn't bite them first. Not so, they say. We eat only the things that bite us first. That way, we know it's fresh. And these will make a wonderful crawfish boil this afternoon. Sorry we can't drop in for lunch. But we're after larger game. And in a bayou, we spot two men. They're after larger game, too. Doing it the hard way. What on earth is he doing down there? No, he's not swimming. Right, there he comes up. But wait, now they're both doing it. Well, what they're doing is feeling around submerged logs for catfish, catching them in their bare hands. They're hand fishing. This amazing custom was learned from the Indians, and it was common among the early Cajuns, but today it's practiced only by a few. Dredgings remove the logs the fish use to lay their eggs, and there's now an accumulation of silt on the slowly moving water. And it also takes practice to avoid the cat's barbs, as well as the jaws of a loggerhead turtle or snake. But these Cajuns have a remarkable knowledge, and they catch only the male fish guarding the eggs, leaving the females to breed again, and only enough to eat, resulting in a mess of delicious fixings for dinner. And it's cleaned right on the spot. Just add the right amount of onion and spices and water and let it simmer. And you have a wonderful dish, a sort of a fish bouillabaisse everyone can enjoy. And everyone does, because hand fishing's not a solitary sport, but a Cajun way to share with family and friends. And along with the food comes storytelling, good conversation, and music. Down the road, we join other new friends in another way to spend an afternoon, an increasingly rare event called a cochon de lait. A cochon de lait literally means pig of milk in Cajun French. To us, it's a pig roast, Cajun style. Yesterday, these 5 young pigs were walking around. Now they've been roasting almost 12 hours over the hot coals, and everybody pitches in. It takes nonstop watching all night to make sure they cook properly. It's a family affair, a time to mingle together. Finally, the scientific test to see if it's done, and then it's all carved up, and everybody digs in. When everybody's done, there's the dancing. There's always the dancing. Dancing's an integral part of Cajun life. It's everywhere. And every Saturday night in Eunice, hundreds enjoy an evening of live Cajun and Zydeco music at the Liberty Theater. The sounds of it fill the air as people come for the rendezvous des Cajuns. It's sort of a Cajun Grand Ole Opry with bands such as Rody Romero and the Rockin' Cajuns, among many others. And it's not just the live audience that's enthralled, but the hundreds who listen to it broadcasted live in French over the radio. It's Saturday night in Cajun country. But we can't stay too late, because at 5 o'clock the next morning, we have a date with a grocery store. Johnson's grocery store in Eunice. This sign's why we're here. They're making fresh boudin. They say if you haven't sampled the sausage Matthew Johnson makes, it's for sure you're not Cajun, because he's been making it practically since his daddy started selling it over 50 years ago. The first commercially made boudin in Louisiana, and they say it's still the best around. Boudin's a real Cajun sausage. It used to be made at home. After a pig was slaughtered, the scraps were ground and boiled with seasonings, then mixed with cooked rice. And Matthew makes it the same today, just a whole lot more, up to 1,200 pounds for holiday weekends. It has to be fresh. Cajuns just don't like it any other way. In the old days, sometimes boudin was the only meat available in winter. Some people still make it at home, and it's very popular. Although it's called a sausage, no one eats the casings, though. The stuffing's sort of sucked out, and it's tasty, hot or cold, anytime. And anytime's the good time for a festival, so let's go to a couple. Many of them start with women in traditional dress, dancing along with the beauty queens that are almost always selected. And that's how this one starts in Church Point. But outside, the kids just can't wait. They're all excited to see the parade. It's part of the Buggy Fest in this little town, an annual event where horse-drawn buggies and carriages were used long after the invention of the automobile. And there are dozens of them, some very rare. But people pull them out once a year and show them off. And they come in all sizes. Even the children join in. And the others on the sidelines watch very carefully. Not the buggies, but they're waiting for the candy that's sometimes thrown out. Even frogs have their day, especially in the town of Rain. This little town has an international frog festival once a year. Historic ones are even immortalized on hats. And the live ones look pretty impressive, too. They all line up, each waiting for a shot at fame and fortune, and it comes when the frogs and their jockeys take the stage to vie for the honor of being the best. And all the frogs have names. This one's Scarlet O'Frogga. And Wart Simpson is here, too. But the moment of truth really arrives when they're stripped of their costumes for the jumping event. We've been told that this one has spectacular agility. Not bad. This jockey's a little queasy about hers, but he shows great style, too. But there's some unexpected problems. And mistakes are made. But all wait with bated breath for the official results. Then the queen is selected and crowned and gets her picture taken. Wait a minute. What about the frogs? Oh, no. What a way to lose your dignity. And more. A little further south, we're headed toward St. Martinsville, New Iberia, and Avery Island. and we're going to take the back way, on top of a levee. From here, it's a whole different world. It's filled with nature. And it's a world where signs don't mean much, especially on a peaceful afternoon, when humans and birds, egrets, are competing for the same fish. And so far, the birds come out ahead. And I'm sure the humans have to wonder if there's anything at all down there for them. We see just a couple of contented snakes on a rock, waiting for everybody to leave. So we do, and we arrive in St. Martinsville. This little town is filled with Indian and Cajun and French legends, but among them, the poignant love story adopted by the poet Longfellow in his poem Evangeline, because they say it was here behind the church along the Bayou Teche that Emmeline Lebec, a Canadian woman, found her betrothed after being forcefully separated from him many years before in Canada, but found that he had married someone else, and she died of a broken heart. And close by, a grave with Emmeline's name, and above it, the statue of Longfellow's Evangeline, adopted from her tragic legend, placed here in 1929 after a movie was made of the love story. But outside St. Martinsville, amid Farmer's Field, there are other legends with happier endings, like Pine Oak Alley, all that's left of a plantation built by a wealthy Frenchman in 1820. It's said when his two daughters were married, he put giant spiders in the trees and had gold dust sprinkled on the webs. And as the bridal carriages came through, each passed under a shimmering golden canopy. Nearby, the Atchafalaya River flows south to the Gulf of Mexico. It's part of America's third largest swamp, and we're off to explore with the crawfishermen. Passing areas channeled and dredged, trying to change the course of the flow. Now summer camps stand on land that's been drained, but other camps imply what these people know, that the Atchafalaya has a mind of its own and will probably fight to stay where it wants. Oil and gas and other treasures make the Atchafalaya one of the most productive swamps in the nation. But it also offers a visual banquet for those just willing to stop for a moment and feast at its many wonders. And as we go deeper and deeper, all of the profoundly different areas have in common the peaceful, ever southward flowing water, depositing silt, building up the land, pushing the swamp closer to the Gulf, and shrinking the open waterways. Now only pirogues and flat-bottom crawfishing skiffs can maneuver some of the very narrow passages, and they go on for miles. The denseness of this untamed wilderness seems overwhelming to a first-time visitor, but our guide knows it well, and our reward lies ahead in a carpet of green and blue water hyacinths. Once regarded as a nuisance, the flowers act as filters to the water, making it healthy for the crawfish that live here. You know, it's said crawfish started out as lobsters in Canada, but following the Cajuns down, the stress caused them to grow smaller and smaller, but tastier and tastier. And we're going to see as we stop for a moment for a crawfish boil. All you need is some boiling water and just a little salt, well, maybe a little more, and the method for eating them. It's really simple. You find the biggest, you break it in half, you pinch the tail, and you bite the meat. It does sound simple, doesn't it? Even to a Yankee trying it for the first time. Okay, he's done it. No, the Yankee's not getting it. But anyway, all afternoon it goes on, and everybody gets their fill with the method, except the Yankee, still working on the first. Meanwhile, another day ends on the Atchafalaya with its towering boughs, trailing mosses, magnificent splendor. And we bid it a fond adieu. And travel 75 miles south to Avery Island, which isn't an island at all, but a gigantic salt dome with exotic gardens and birds and animals, and an 800-year-old Buddhist temple given to the McIlhenny family, who's owned the island for generations. Besides crepe myrtle and mimosa are hundreds of other species imported by Edward Avery McIlhenny over 100 years ago. And both the varieties of plants and animals has grown extensively, to include nearly 100,000 egrets who nest each spring. Those are the results of Edward's concern to save the snowy egret from plume hunters in the late 1800s. Searching the swamps, he found only 7, but raising them in captivity, this colony was established. Now all egrets have sanctuary, where the young ones can learn the somewhat awesome process of learning to fly. Anolia Richard's been a guide at Avery Island for 35 years, and she feels the birds and animals are like her children. In fact, she's looking for one of her babies right now. This one's kind of shy. He needs a little coaxing. His name is Charles. And sometimes Charles needs a little encouragement to come and play. But when he does, he enjoys a little friendly game of tag. Now, Charles is only 5 feet long. He really is a baby. And he loves treats, especially the marshmallows that she brings him, but he has a little trouble picking up anything on land. Not so his older brother. He's a 9-foot eating machine. And he knows how to do it very well. Good one. The island's first pepper plants were planted by Edward's father, Edmund, before the Civil War. But Union forces destroyed everything except for one plant. Later, Edmund mixed those peppers with salt and vinegar, and he created a sauce named after the town in Mexico from where the peppers came. Tabasco is still made by the McIlhenny family right on Avery Island. And sniffing those mashed peppers is a real thrill. If you have a cold, it'll clear it up on the spot. Later, mixed with salt and vinegar, that liquid fire is stored like fine wine to age for 3 years. And bottled is a sauce hot enough to satisfy tastes all over the world. Over 100 countries import it, and it's sprinkled on everything from chili to chop suey. The Japanese love it on spaghetti and pizza. And over 75 million regular bottles and 50 million miniatures pass through here each year. And the sauce has grown into all kinds of things in the general store, from a way to trim a Christmas tree to telling what time's hot for the hot sauce. But it's time for us to move on toward the towns of Morgan City and Houma, past rows of sugar cane maturing in the sun. It's southern Louisiana's crop, and abandoned plantations with memories of those who once harvested that crop, and people responding to the calls of the bayous, practically begging to throw a line in, stay a while. But our pace picks up early in the morning in Morgan City on Labor Day, when everyone comes to the waterfront for the blessing of the shrimp and petroleum fleets. To administer that blessing, the bishop and his entourage leave to meet the boats right in the middle of the bay, and meet they do. Big ones, small ones, shrimp boats, gigantic oil vessels, and every private boat in the area, all converge loaded with people and shrimp, and circle around as the holy water is given. This custom is practiced in many South Gulf cities. But the real eye-catcher here is when the huge vessels carrying the festival's king and queen actually come nose to nose for a champagne toast. It's a tremendous feat of maneuvering for the captains, but hardly a drop is spilled. And Morgan City's not the only place having thrills on the water. In nearby Homa, others are out with guide Alligator Annie. Every day she stops her tour right in the middle of Terrebonne Swamp. And here's why. Ladies and gentlemen, may we present the Alligator Olympics, where alligators from all over the swamp come to vie for the prize chicken legs that she brings every day. Now, some of the losers aren't very gracious. But certainly, this Alligator Olympics is a legend in this part of Terrebonne Swamp, Louisiana. And there's more on the bayous of Lafourche and Cocodrie. Along the bayou of Lafourche, there's a road. People say it's the longest street in the world, 120 miles, all the way to the Gulf, with towns all running together, and everybody knows everybody. Once, a man driving a car announced the end of World War II at the north end, and by the time he reached the south, they already knew it had spread that fast just by word of mouth. And the towns are all linked together to the Gulf for the enormous quantities of seafood it provides. But it's also in one of the richest agricultural areas in the state. And it's a wonderful place to get your fill of fresh oysters. Now, all you have to do is just discard the shells in a pile that someone else started. I certainly didn't eat all those. Moving southward, the marshes leading to the Gulf. Where commercial shrimp boats go out for days to collect their catch. We're trying our luck on a private vessel, out for an early morning run, dropping our net in what is still considered the most valuable fishery in the United States, despite what some say is its questionable future. Commercial shrimpers say they've suffered down here from too much competition and low wholesale prices. But on this private boat, just out for a leisurely way to spend a Sunday morning, the conversation leans more toward how good today's catch may be. It isn't as productive as expected, and we try and multiply the damage done to the crabs and other sea life that's caught in this net. They're thrown back overboard, but many don't survive. We're told, though, that commercial nets now must have features that allow the fish and crabs to escape. But this shrimper tells us they're expensive and don't work well. But despite all the controversy, both private catches and commercial shrimping is an important part of life on the Gulf. And so are the abandoned oil rigs we pass. We'll see them again as we leave Bayou Cocodrie, this time to venture out 20 miles into the Gulf with a crew collecting salinity samples for the National Marine Fisheries to study Gulf currents, one of many programs being done. But when our work is finished, it's time to haul up and go deep sea fishing, Louisiana style. Because like everything else, it's done a little bit differently around the abandoned oil platforms. They first thought these rigs would harm the fish, but actually they're used now as reefs, and the fish gather around, and we're in for more surprises, because this is the first thing our captain does. He beats the water. Now, noise chases fish away, right? Wrong. These fish are curious, and they come in to investigate, and we're ready.
I feel like that's right. I feel good.
Lemonfish flock in. We have more than enough. What can I say, except the method works. The little towns along the Gulf have so far been undiscovered by many outsiders. but we find them a wonderful escape from the roar of the crowd. And we return for one of the largest roars of any crowd to Mardi Gras now in New Orleans. It's Louisiana's largest festival, and it does bring thrills to thousands each year, with bigger and better floats, and everyone after at least one string of beads to bring home. The stories surrounding this celebration are endless, along with the crowds of people in their costumes. For sheer pageantry, there's nothing like New Orleans Mardi Gras. It's the culmination of 300 years of French, Spanish, and Creole, and other cultures that come together in this magnificent city. But Mardi Gras itself is much more than pageantry. And it's much more than just a parade in New Orleans. Because Mardi Gras bonds many communities together, and many communities have Mardi Gras each year. And to experience that bond, we're leaving New Orleans to attend a festival tourists seldom see, a traditional Cajun Mardi Gras. And it begins in a quieter way months before, in a home in Iota, not far from Lafayette. The screen masks that Jackie Miller creates are used in the festival here. From bits and pieces come images that seem perhaps a bit grotesque to outsiders. But their origins go deep into Cajun history, all the way back to medieval France. And the traditions they represent are still much alive today. As early in the morning, participants gather for the running of the Cajun Mardi Gras. Now, each Cajun Mardi Gras has its own customs. In many towns, it's not just adult men who costume, but women and children too. But all Cajun Mardi Gras symbolize the same thing, the sharing of wealth, by visiting homes in the area, and in return for entertaining the people, given food to take back to town for the huge gumbo that's shared by all. The route's kept secret, but we've learned where this one's going, and they're just waiting for the Mardi Gras captain as he arrives.
All right, let them come in. Oh, man. All these people want to see the Mardi Gras. Good. I'm glad to see that.
Permission is always asked. Only then does it proceed. Starting with a traditional song over 400 years old, performed in costumes parodying medieval French ladies. The begging for pennies and coins is also symbolic, the redistribution of wealth, a characteristic we've seen many times in our visit to Cajun country. But today it's enforced with all the hoops and hollers. This is a living entity. The parameters of societies are defined by the houses selected. But it's also a time for fun, the one day a year to forget troubles and play and chase after a chicken turned loose. It's an honor to catch it and turn it over to the captain to add to the gumbo pot. The chickens don't know that, though. They're just busy watching what's going on. And it goes on all day long. People playing, chickens watching. At every house, people playing, chickens still watching, and people still playing. And it's repeated several times, and it always ends with the dancing. The one day a year it's acceptable for Cajun men to dance together. And then the fun, along with all the chickens and the food, is taken back into town at the end of the day. And while the gumbo cooks, the celebrating continues. to the stroke of midnight when everybody goes home to begin the solemn 40 days of Lent. And it's time for us to leave also, perhaps with a better understanding of our 18th state and certainly a better appreciation of all the cultures we've found here. An appreciation that's sometimes been lacking in the past, but one that's spreading.
We found ourselves in Louisiana. We had been searching many years. Now our lives are intermingled. It's like music to our ears.
As more come to experience these remarkable people, the land and the customs, most of all, the legends of Louisiana.